12:34 a.m. It started shortly after the plane maintained cruising altitude. The sound was distinctly jarring, random, not dissimilar to a beefed-up Amber Alert. The only difference was the accompanying lack of guilt rolling in your stomach when you tried your best to ignore it. This, however, was hard to ignore. Seriously. Jesus, I muttered under my breath, maybe 20 minutes into the beeping, trying to block out the sound with my hands. Spoiler alert, it wasn't working very well. Yeah, tell me about it, I heard the guy next to me say. He was on the smaller side, thin, bespectacled. Wasn't sure what the politically correct term would be, but he was someone I describe as stereotypically nerdy. An expensive-looking briefcase had been tucked under his arm. I mean, if there really was a Jesus, I'm sure we wouldn't be in this situation, eh? He laughed. I also laughed, weakly. Name's Ricardo, the guy said and extended his hand towards me. But you can just call me Rick. Nice to meet you, I said, and we shook hands. So, you got any theories about all this? Rick said, gesturing up at the overhead panel where the beeping seemed to be blaring from. Theories? I don't know. Something's probably screwy with the PA, that's all, I said. Why, you got any interesting ones? Before Rick could answer, there was a loud, "Oi, so what are we doing about this?" from the back. "Yeah, lady, come on," another dude said. "My ears are bleeding over here. What's going on?" A couple of passengers gave nods and hoots of approval. One of the air hostesses, who was a little ahead of us, stood up straight. Her face etched not only with confusion, but concern. I've never seen an air hostess look concerned before. "We're not exactly sure," she said timidly. "But don't worry, we're working on it. We've been having quite a few issues with our PA system lately, so it's definitely not an unexpected interruption." People began whispering at this. "But why can't you just turn it off?" someone asked. The air hostess hesitated. It is off." Well, where's the sound coming from then?" I don't know. How could you not know?" Yeah, don't they train you people for these situations?" Before the situation could get out of control, another attendant stepped in and gently pulled her coworker to the side, whose eyes were brimming with tears at this point. "Thank you, everyone," she said, leading her down the aisle. "But please, no more questions. Stay in your seats as we sort this out. We will update you once we have more information." The beeping just seemed to get louder at this. Rick turned towards me. "Geez, that was rough." "Yeah, it's not like it's her fault or anything," I agreed. "It's probably just a wiring or software issue." Could be," Rick said. He seemed a little lost in thought. "That or maybe it might even be interference from another electronic device or something. Who knows?" I didn't really take that to mean much at the moment. Why would I? It wasn't anything more than an interesting theory. I looked out the window, staring mindlessly at the inky black sky. The infinite beyond, hoping the beeping would soon become nothing but background noise, a subconscious lullaby. 1:44 a.m. The beeping didn't sound so random anymore. I mean, an hour into listening to the same thing over and over and over again was bound to uncover some consistencies or discrete patterns. The most noticeable pattern would be the longer than normal gaps between each set or sequence of beeps. After the gap, the same series of beeps would play again. I even managed to record and isolate one of these sequences later on. Rick had apparently figured this out before I had, because his knees seemed to be shaking perfectly in sync with the beeping. He was mouthing the sounds as well. Maybe we were both going insane. 2:03 a.m. I swear I'd seen a sliver of green down in the clouds. I didn't make a big deal out of it or anything because I have a mild case of astigmatism and might have distorted the plane's flashing lights or something, but it felt noteworthy regardless. The flight attendants hadn't gotten back to us with anything yet either. 2:23 a.m. Rick had moved past mouthing what he was hearing. Instead, he had opened up his briefcase a few minutes ago, taken out a notebook, and was now scribbling fervently, pausing every now and then whenever the beeping became a little too muffled. I didn't want to bother him as he worked, so I decided to return my attention to the window, in case that sliver of green would show up again. 2:39 a.m. No. Oh? Rick mumbled when a baby started to suddenly cry, throwing him off completely. Rick wheeled around in his seat and yelled, "Hey, please shut him the fuck up!" Many people turned to look in our direction. The baby, however, didn't shut the fuck up. He kept crying. Everyone else seemed too exhausted and overstimulated to care. Still no updates from the attendants. 2:43 a.m. A couple other passengers around us had seemed to take notice of what Rick was doing. In fact, a small group slowly started to congregate around our aisle, watching as Rick would alternate between listening to the beeping and scribbling in his notebook. "You think someone needs our help?" I heard a woman ask her husband quietly. "Like, is this an SOS signal of some kind?" "I highly doubt it," a man who wasn't her husband answered. "We're pretty high up in the air, and it's not exactly easy to break into a modern commercial PA system, is it?" "Shh!" Rick whipped around to face the man, his eyes bloodshot. Rick's appearance has slowly gotten more and more disheveled as time went on. He truly looked like a crazy person. Just shh, okay? None of you has a fucking clue about what's going on. Zero! Go back to your seats and leave me alone." "Oh, you're saying you do then?" the man retorted. "No offense, but you look like you just graduated high school, mate. What makes you so qualified?" 12 years with the Navy as an aeronautical engineer, asshat. That's what makes me qualified," Rick said haughtily and returned to his notebook. "Now leave me the fuck alone, why won't you?" 2:58 a.m. The flight attendants had to come out of hiding and manually tell us that we would be landing soon. This was the first time we'd seen any of them since the beginning of the flight, so obviously people started berating them with questions as soon as they stepped outside. They refused to answer any of them. Their faces were as ghostly white as Rick's was. Oh yeah, Rick had just completely shut off at this point. His eyes were as wide as saucers, devoid of any emotion. He'd been bound to the state for at least 15 minutes, ever since he stopped scribbling in his notebook and slipped it back into his briefcase. Something told me he found what he was looking for. 3:14 a.m. The beeping stopped at some point during our descent. People started to clap and holler. 3:26 a.m. Everyone clapped again when the wheels hit the ground. Rick seemed to sluggishly come to his senses once the lights in the cabin turned on, but his movements were zombie-like. We all exited the plane as swiftly as we could. One person even got to their knees in the airport and began kissing the floor. 3:40 a.m. I won't lie to you. I was paranoid. Every chance I could get, even at baggage claim, I glanced outside of the giant windows lining the airport, searching the clouds for that sliver of green. "Hey." Someone tapped me on my shoulder as I waited for my bags. I turned around. It was Rick. His armpits were soaked, and his eyes were redder than they should have been for a flight that didn't quite classify as a red eye. "Rick, what's going on, man?" I said. "Are you okay?" "Listen, I just need you to hold on to this for me, please," Rick mumbled, shoving his briefcase into my hands. Just trust me. Just trust me, okay? Don't open any of it. None, you hear me, until you get back home. I don't think you'd want to do that anyway." "What? But just trust me." There was something animalistic in Rick's voice when he said this, something I didn't have much time to investigate because he scrambled away at once, disappearing into a crowd. I looked down at the briefcase, perplexed, and that's when it hit me. How did he know I live in DC? 4:32 a.m. I finally made it home, back into my tiny apartment. I quickly closed the door behind me and turned the lights on, trembling a little bit. I sat down on my desk and set down Rick's briefcase. Part of me didn't want to open it. "Fuck me," I said, and closed my eyes, sighing. Well, here goes nothing. I reached into the bag and pulled out the only two things that were inside, a thumb drive and the notebook. I didn't even want to deal with the thumb drive yet. My heart pounding, I went for the notebook instead. It was moist and gross, tainted by Rick's sweat, no doubt. I flipped through the mostly empty pages until I got a section full of tiny scribbles. Oh God, what the fuck? What the actual fuck? Just like I suspected. Morse code. There was a final sequence that Rick had written down, but the ones above, meanwhile, had all been scribbled or scratched out. When I saw the corresponding letters he described, however, I might as well have just jumped out of my apartment window at the moment and committed suicide, because what the actual fuck? No, wait. Maybe Rick was wrong. I could check the audio recording, the one I had taken on the plane. Shaking much worse than ever before. I emailed the recording to myself and downloaded it on my laptop. I searched for one of those Morse code to English translators and uploaded the screening there. Each second of waiting was agony, and then it was done listening. And my worst nightmare became more realized. As if on instinct, I looked outside my window, and there it was. The green sliver in the clouds, except it grew brighter and brighter and brighter as I processed the decoded text in my head. You are not alone.